A faint cry in the scorching midday sun became the trigger. Logan Hayes, a recently discharged veteran, immediately broke open the door and carried the unconscious little girl out of the locked SUV. He thought he was just saving a life, but in reality, he had touched a festering secret, where a child was the victim and the entire system was pretending not to see. Brookfield, 12:17 p.m. The sun blazed on the tin roofs of the Brookfield supermarket, the road surface shimmering with heat haze like smoke. In front of the small clinic at the end of the street, a man sat slumped on the steps, his dark t-shirt stained with sweat and blood, his hand trembling on his knee, his eyes fixed on the closed emergency room door. His name was Logan Hayes. No one asked him where it hurt, but he didn't feel the pain yet. Only the pounding of his heart in his chest, a cold feeling creeping silently down his spine in the nearly 40-degree heat. The smell of blood and burnt plastic clung to his sleeve. The voices around him, nurses, paramedics, the sound of machines, sounded like echoes from a faraway place. Just a few minutes before, he had been standing at the gas station on the corner, holding a newly bought iced coffee, about to turn onto the road behind to find the bookstore. Brookfield was a small town, as quiet as if it had just woken up. He planned to stroll around and get acquainted, breathing in the air of a peaceful place, something he had longed for during his years in the military. But then, as he walked past the parking lot behind the supermarket, he heard a strange sound, a dry, short, intermittent sound, like the weak cry of a kitten. There was no one around. He turned his head, slowed his pace. A black SUV was parked close to the fence, slightly shaded. The windows were cloudy, covered with a thin layer of dust. He couldn't see anyone inside, but the sound again was clearer. Logan approached. He leaned down and looked inside. Through the tinted glass, he saw a little girl lying sideways on the back seat, her head lolling like a rag doll. Her face was flushed, her small hands clenched, her lips pale, her shirt soaked in sweat. He tried to pull the door open. Locked. He knocked hard, then shouted, "Is anyone here?" "There's a child trapped in the car." There was no response. No one came out of the supermarket, no sign of any adults. He banged on the glass again, harder, but it still didn't break. Blood trickled from his elbow. He stepped back, scanning the parking lot. An old brick lay near the curb. He picked it up and slammed it into the window with all his strength. The glass shattered. Shards flew out, scattering across the seats. Logan didn't wait. He reached in, released the latch, pulled the door open, and leaned inside. The little girl's body was burning hot. Her small hand didn't respond. One eye was closed, the other only slightly open, like a petal about to fall. Logan scooped her into his arms, held her tight, and ran. There was no time to call an ambulance, no one to help. He crossed 2 rows of cars, ran across the small street shouting, "Help me! A child needs medical attention." A woman from the pharmacy pointed, "There's a clinic on the west corner." He didn't stop to thank her. He burst through the clinic's glass door, pushing it open with his shoulder, gasping for breath. "Emergency! A baby in a car. Heat stroke." 2 nurses jumped. One ran to take the baby, the other called for a doctor. A gurney slid out from the hallway. They put her on it, attached equipment, checked her pulse. A woman's voice rang out, calm and clear. "Take her to room 1. I'm Doctor Rachel." Logan stood there, motionless, frozen. His hands were numb. His clothes were soaked. The smell of sweat, hot plastic, and fresh blood mixed together. He couldn't remember how he had breathed to run here. He couldn't remember the face of the woman who had pointed the way. All he remembered was the child in his arms, weightless and still. Someone offered him a seat, gave him a bottle of water. He didn't sit, didn't drink. The emergency room door opened. A woman in a white coat came out. She took off her mask, looked around, and caught his eye. "Are you the one who brought the baby in?" Logan nodded. His throat was so dry he couldn't speak. "I'm Dr. Rachel." He waited for the next sentence. Anything. He was ready for the worst. She took a breath and said, her voice even but sharp, "You just saved a life." She paused. Her eyes didn't leave him. "But this is much more complicated than that." Logan looked at the blood flowing from the scratch on his arm, as if it was something alien, not belonging to him. The pain didn't come right away. Like fear. They both always came late. The nurse told him to sit down. She was a blonde woman, in her 40s, with a voice as soft as a warm towel. "I'll just clean and bandage it. The doctor is busy in there," she said, washing the wound and looking at him out of the corner of her eye. Logan nodded slightly, without speaking. She asked him his name. He replied softly, "Logan Hayes." "Address?" He paused for a moment. The question seemed simple. Finally, he just breathed out, "I just arrived in Brookfield yesterday. I'm staying at the motel on the east side." The nurse took notes. He sat still. In that moment, memory opened like a door slammed open by the wind. Sand, smoke, shouting. A house half collapsed in a residential area on the outskirts of Mosul. He had gone in there after the unit had just retreated. No one told him to go back. But he had gone back. The girl at that time was also about 2 years old, wrapped in a thin scarf. Half of her face was slightly burned. He carried her running through gunfire, under a red sky. Was she heavier than Ava today, or were his arms weaker today? He couldn't remember clearly. Logan jumped when the nurse gently touched his sleeve, signaling she was done. He thanked her, his voice still hoarse. She nodded, didn't ask anything more, just left a bottle of water on the table, and left. A moment later, a man came in. Light brown shirt, dark jeans, black shoes with worn heels, wearing a police badge on his belt. The man didn't say anything right away, just stood watching Logan for a few seconds, then walked over and extended his hand. "Frank Delgado, Brookfield County Detective," he said, his voice deep and even. Logan shook his hand. The other man's hand was firm and unhurried. Logan recognized it immediately. This was the kind of person who didn't draw conclusions without enough data. "You're the one who found the child?" Delgado asked. Logan nodded. "I heard a sound from inside the car. Did you see anyone else in the parking lot?" "Number." "There was no one near the car at that time. I broke the glass and brought the girl here." Delgado wrote a few lines. He looked up. "I know this can be traumatic, but I need you to tell me more clearly. Every detail is important." Logan took a breath. This time he told the story slowly, step by step. The weak cry, the locked car door, the glass too dark to see clearly at first, the feeling of time shrinking like a thread, sweat soaking his back, the brick under his feet, the small body lighter than the military backpack he used to carry, and hotter than anything he had ever touched. Delgado didn't interrupt, only nodded occasionally. When Logan finished, he only asked one more question. "Did you see anything unusual about the car? Signs of hard braking, obscured windows, blurry license plate?" Logan shook his head. "I didn't notice. My eyes only saw the child." Delgado pursed his lips, folded his notebook. "All right. For now, you can rest. If I need more information, I'll contact you." He left a business card. "And thank you, really." When Delgado left, Logan remained seated. He closed his eyes for a moment. In his head at this time, it wasn't the image of the collapsed house in Mosul, but the face of the little girl just today, pale, wet, and shivering in his arms. In the next room, Dr. Rachel Kim was standing next to Ava's bed. She wore gloves, goggles, her eyes intensely focused. She worked in silence, gesturing to the nurse. Ava was out of danger, but Rachel didn't feel relieved. She was used to serious emergencies. But something wasn't right. The blood vessels on the little girl's left arm showed signs of prolonged compression. There were a few round bruises on her wrists, like marks from rope or restraint. On her leg was a thin scar, healed, but leaving a small, long line. She shined a light, discovered a light blue bruise on her right shoulder. She stood still for a moment. Her experience told her these marks weren't from ordinary falls, and they couldn't be on a child who had only been forgotten once. When the nurse adjusted the monitor, Rachel went outside. She didn't go back to the on-call room. She went straight to the hallway where Logan was sitting, where Delgado had just left. She stood a few steps away from Logan, her voice not loud, not fast, but without room for hesitation. "We need to report this to the Department of Social Services." Logan looked up, slightly startled. "Is she okay?" Rachel nodded. "Okay, physically. But..." She paused, her eyes holding back what she hadn't said. This girl may not have just been forgotten once. No one said anything more. It wasn't necessary. The atmosphere at that time was as silent as before a storm. But this silence didn't come from the sky, but from things that had happened long before Logan heard the intermittent cry in the parking lot on a hot afternoon. The clinic door burst open as if blown by the wind. Two people rushed in almost at the same time, a curly-haired woman, her makeup smeared with tears, and a tall man, his wrist adorned with a shiny gold bracelet. They shouted the little girl's name in the waiting room as if they had just woken up from a nightmare. "Where's my daughter?" "Ava. Where is she?" the woman screamed, her eyes wild with panic. A nurse came out of the on-call room. "Please calm down. The child is being monitored medically. We left her in the car for only 5 minutes. I went to buy milk. Carl waited outside. We didn't expect..." The man named Carl interrupted, his voice low and strained. "If you know where she is, tell us quickly. Don't preach morality here." The nurse took a half step back. Logan, sitting in the corner of the room, looked up. He had anticipated this, but didn't expect it to be so fast. Rachel appeared, her eyes as cold as a dust-free mirror. She wasn't hasty, wasn't compromising. "I am the doctor in charge of Ava's emergency care. She is being monitored. At this time, I cannot allow anyone to visit." Linda staggered. "I'm her mother." "And I am responsible for her current health," Rachel replied evenly. Carl took half a step forward, his finger pointing directly at Rachel's face. "Listen, Lady Doctor, I have the right..." Delgado appeared from the back hallway. No need to show a badge, no need to speak, just a look from him made Carl lower his hand. He nodded slightly to Rachel, then turned to the couple. "I am Detective Delgado. We are conducting an investigation into Ava's serious condition. This is the first step. I need both of you to cooperate." Linda slumped into a chair, covering her face with her hands. "We didn't mean to. It's just, I thought Carl had taken her with him. He told me to go into the supermarket. I thought she wasn't there." Carl frowned, but didn't stop her. "It's a misunderstanding. She's forgetful. I'm tired too. Too much work this week. She's stressed. I just went to call a car." Logan quietly observed from a distance. These two didn't seem devastated with worry for their child. Not a single question about Ava's health, not a single mention of symptoms, only excuses. Rachel didn't interrupt. She quietly walked closer to Delgado, handed him a clear plastic envelope. Inside was a copy of the injuries on Ava's body, the bruises on her wrists, the old scar on her leg, the scratch on her collarbone. Delgado skimmed through it quickly, frowning. Rachel only said one sentence, enough that no one else could hear but him. It can't just be from sitting in the car seat for a long time. Carl seemed to sense the eyes focused on him, so he waved his hand at the nurse passing by. "Hey, get the doctor out here right now." "Give my daughter back. What are you holding her for?" The nurse paused, but Rachel stepped forward, blocking her. "The child needs medical care. All decisions must go through social services." "Social services," Linda repeated, her voice high-pitched, then looked around. "What the hell is going on here? We just forgot to turn on the air conditioning. It's a small thing." The side door opened. A slender woman, her hair neatly tied, wearing a white shirt and trousers, came in. Her voice wasn't loud, but clear as a cold blade. "Hello, I am Sarah Wright, representing the Department of Social Services." No one answered. No one moved. Sarah walked straight to Delgado, exchanged a quick word. She turned to the couple, still keeping her voice as gentle as if she were reading a document. According to Article 17 Vermont State Child Protection Law, when there is suspicion of abuse or neglect, the parental rights of the parents will be temporarily suspended for investigation. Linda slumped into a chair, covering her face, crying. Carl sat stiffly, his face reddening in patches. "You have no right to do this to me. I'll call a lawyer." Sarah nodded. "You have that right. But Ava, from this moment on, will be temporarily cared for by the child protection system and will not be in contact with you until the court decides." Logan didn't say anything, but when Carl's eyes swept over him, looking like he wanted to tear him apart, Logan just sat still, his hands gripping the armrest so tightly that his knuckles were white. Delgado tore a piece of paper from his notebook, wrote something, and handed it to Sarah. "Arrange for someone to monitor and contact a temporary guardian within 24 hours. We will send more evidence from security cameras." The dialogue ended as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Sarah bowed her head in greeting, then turned inside. Rachel quietly followed. Carl sat silently, his teeth clenched. Linda just cried, her knees drawn up to her chest. A moment later, when the hallway was empty, Carl leaned towards his wife, whispering through his teeth, "I told you to lock the car and turn on the air conditioning. You forgot again." Linda didn't answer. Her lips were pursed, her hands wiping away tears. They didn't know in the dimly lit hallway, a few meters away, Delgado was still standing. He didn't speak, just quietly pulled a small recorder from his pocket, pressed the stop button. The duty room of the Brookfield Clinic was quickly cleared. A chipboard conference table was pulled out into the middle of the room. There was no time to wait for the police station or procedural meetings. Some things, if delayed by an hour, would have consequences that would last a lifetime. Rachel was the first to speak. Her voice was as cold as steel, drawn from a furnace. "I don't want to repeat myself, but the bruises on Ava's body didn't come from a single impact. There are at least 3 different layers of injury. Old, new, and very new. The scar on the pelvis could be a sign of a closed fracture that wasn't treated." Delgado didn't take notes. He just looked at Rachel, his eyes unblinking. Sarah sat next to her, her hands on the edge of the table, her back straight, her face expressionless. When Rachel stopped, she said quickly, "I propose applying Article 22 emergency protection in 72 hours. Ava must be taken out of parental custody, pending psychological assessment and opening of a temporary residence file." Delgado nodded. "I'll sign the confirmation, but I need more data, strong enough to keep Ava out of their hands until the hearing." He stood up, took out his phone, opened a video he had just received from the technical team. The image wasn't clear, but it was enough to see Linda and Carl. The camera outside the supermarket recorded at 12:01 in the afternoon. They opened the SUV door, looked into the back seat. Linda said something, then quickly slammed the door shut. Carl stood near the curb, holding a phone. A minute later, both of them strode, then got into a silver Ford, waiting. The car sped off south. Delgado said slowly, "No one returned to the SUV for 3 hours later. The camera from the back confirmed that." He closed the phone. "I'm having someone check the Ford, but I want to verify right away where they went." Rachel asked, "Casino?" "Casino," Delgado confirmed. 18 miles away. I'll go myself." 2 hours later, he stood in the security office of the Silver Bluff Casino, a place filled with the smell of cigarette smoke and dazzling white lights. The security staff rewound the camera. Images of Carl and Linda were clear. 12:40. They entered the main hall. Carl withdrew cash at the counter. Linda received a glass of red wine from the bar. There was no sign that they were panicking or missing their child. A server remembered them. That couple was very noisy. The husband bragged to the person next to him that they sent the baby to someone they knew to look after so they could relax a bit today. Delgado requested a copy of the video and a statement. At the clinic, Rachel wrote a medical report. Her fingers typed evenly on the keyboard, but her back ached and her eyes began to feel heavy. She listed each injury, described the size, color, location, wrist, shoulder, thigh, waist. No one read these reports except those who needed to know, but for her, each word carried the meaning of survival. The left arm is weak. The muscle reflexes are slow. It could be the result of an old closed fracture that was not casted. The bruises on the ribs are uneven, not like a natural fall. There is a rope mark, very likely from the seatbelt, but tightened more than normal. She read the entire conclusion again, then printed out 2 copies, signed them. Sarah was the first to contact Ava after the emergency care. She was awake, but didn't speak, didn't cry, and didn't laugh. Just looked around with big eyes, as empty as a ripple-free lake. Sarah entered the room, not carrying documents, not wearing a name tag, only carrying a small blue cloth doll. She didn't ask the baby's name, didn't touch her. Just sat down next to the bed, opened the bag, placed the doll next to her. Her name is Ellie. She doesn't have any friends yet. Ava looked at the toy, then turned away. But her left hand, the weak hand, touched the doll's ear. As if checking if it was real, Sarah didn't say anything more. She knew that children who had been traumatized didn't respond to words. They responded to distance, to the atmosphere, to the look in the eyes. A few minutes later, the door opened. Logan came in, hesitant. He stood in the doorway, as if afraid he would disrupt something fragile. Sarah looked at him, nodded slightly. Ava didn't react at first, but when he sat down in the chair opposite, silent, his hands on his knees, Ava turned back. She looked at him. For a moment. Then small feet crawled lightly down the bed. Not speaking, not crying, just walking towards him. Logan didn't raise his hand. Only when Ava touched his finger did he slowly squeeze it. Sarah saw that. A thin connection, weaker than words, but stronger than any resistance. Night fell. The town gradually turned off the lights. Delgado returned to the clinic nearly 10 o'clock at night. Logan hadn't left yet. He sat in the hallway, his shoulders against the wall, his eyes blank. Delgado handed him a thin file, the yellow paper wrinkled at the corners. He didn't open it. He said, "This is Ava's old medical record. Nothing remarkable, if you don't pay attention." Logan opened it. A few diagnoses of fever, a prescription for pneumonia. Once he checked the left hand due to impact when falling in the kitchen. But something was wrong. Delgado pointed to the last line, March. Ava was taken to the hospital in a state of high fever and prolonged loss of appetite. No one asked questions. No one suspected. No one reported. He paused, his voice much deeper. Until today. Logan didn't say anything, but his eyes didn't leave the file. He flipped back and forth, as if wanting to overturn something bigger than the pages, a habit of insensitivity, a silent acceptance that lasted too long. In his heart, an unnamed feeling rose up. Not anger, nor pain. Something else heavier, deeper, and rooted. Sarah sat in front of the old computer in the Brookfield Hospital's archive room, the light from the screen reflecting into her glasses as two blurred streaks. She carefully typed each keyword. Ava Monroe, file code 1175-A. The data appeared slowly, as if hesitating before revealing something that didn't want to be discovered. 3 hospital admissions within 8 months. The first time, impact on the forehead due to falling from the dining chair. The second time, prolonged high fever, dehydration. The most recent, bruising of the knee after impact with a coffee table. No serious signs recorded. But Sarah paid attention to the timing. All 3 times fell on long weekends. Thanksgiving, spring break, and Independence Day week. She clicked to see the insurance payment data, along with declarations clearly stating the person who took the child to the hospital was the neighbor, the aunt, a close friend of the mother. Linda and Carl didn't appear. Sarah printed it out, bound it into a volume. She was used to signs like this, repeated, evasive, and wrapped in a layer of smooth talk that made people want to believe. At the same time, Delgado stood in front of Linda and Carl's 2-story wooden house, a search warrant in his hand. The local police chief had sent 2 more people with him. This couldn't be delayed any longer. The house was too quiet when they entered. There was no sign of a scuffle, no odor, no mess. Delgado had seen houses like this many times, neat on the outside, but cold lurking in every corner. In the living room, a closed wooden cabinet. Delgado glanced over, tried to open it. Not locked. Inside were bottles of liquor, vials of sleeping pills, and a notebook with creases on many pages. The first page listed the names of casinos, numbers 800, 800, 1200, lost must recover. The middle page was Linda's work schedule marked in red ink. Ava sent, Zrenia, Sestra K. Pozvonite obratno. The police chief nudged Delgado. You need to see this. He opened the door to the children's room. On the wall shelf, where stuffed animals or storybooks should have been, was a small camera disguised as a stuffed bear. Delgado climbed up and took it down. The memory card was still in the machine. The police laptop was connected on the spot. The image appeared. Ava was tied to the dining chair with a scarf, her face bent to her chest. The sound was crackly, but clear enough to hear Carl growl, "Eat! All you do is sit there. What else can you do?" Then a thump. The chair fell over. The image blurred. Ava fell backwards, her head hitting the edge of the table. Delgado tightened his jaw. He reached out and removed the memory card, put it in his pocket. The indictment was no longer a possibility, but mandatory. Logan was summoned back to the police station, not because of suspicion, but because he was the only witness from the time Ava was discovered. Delgado invited him into a small meeting room, the papers ready. Logan sat down, read the minutes slowly, each line pressing on his chest. I confirm seeing a girl locked in a black SUV, unattended, in a state of exhaustion. I broke the glass, took her to the Brookfield clinic. When he came to the part to sign, Logan suddenly stopped. The paper was thin, but the image attached to the file hit his eyes. Ava in the first photo sat, curled up, the light slanting from the car door. In the second picture, her eyes were slightly open, full of red blood and sweat. The pen trembled in his hand. If I hadn't passed by that day, then... Logan released the sentence that he couldn't finish. But in the room, no one needed him to say it all. Delgado sat opposite. He didn't interrupt, just pressed softly. You did the right thing. the thing that not everyone does. On the hospital side, Rachel and Sarah agreed on one decision. Ava needed to be taken to a temporary foster family as far away from Linda and Carl as possible. "We can't leave her in the protection center," Rachel said. "She doesn't react to loud noises, is afraid of sudden lights, and may have severe anxiety." Sarah nodded. "I know a place. Martha and Tom, an old couple, no children, have fostered 3 children before. They live 10 minutes from town. Large, quiet garden. They'll take care of Ava, like their own granddaughter." Ava was taken to the new house on a gentle afternoon. Martha held her in her arms, not saying anything, just patting her back. Tom pushed the back door wide open, the sun pouring onto the wooden floor. Ava nestled into Martha, not crying and not looking around. But when Tom spoke in a deep voice, "Are you hungry?" Зрение. Девушка оттолкнулась, укутавшись глубже в грудь. Sarah took note. In the first observation file, she wrote, "Clear, negative reaction to loud male voices. No reaction to being called. Only opens her eyes when touched gently with warm hands. Needs early emotional therapy." While Linda and Carl hired a lawyer. The interrogation took place at the county jail. Carl wore a grey t-shirt. Linda wore a hat covering half her face, her eyes fearful, whether real or acted. The lawyer spoke first. "My clients are under severe financial pressure. They didn't mean to. It's just an accident during mental turmoil." Linda nodded like a machine. Carl sat still, then chuckled softly. "You guys just investigate. That kid didn't die. I raised her from a young age. 1, 2 bruises. You guys act like she's a princess." The lawyer stopped him. "Carl, don't say anything more." Carl still looked at Delgado, his lips curling up. "That baby is worth more than a red card. You think you can keep her from me?" Delgado didn't answer. He closed the file, then stood up. His eyes were no longer patient, but cold as tempered steel. Carl still smiled the smile of someone who didn't regret it, but Delgado knew. He wouldn't be smiling for much longer. Logan stood before the simple wooden gate of Martha Tom's house, one hand holding a cloth bag, the other gently grasping the neck of the teddy bear. The bear wore a sand-colored military uniform with a small red embroidered line on the chest. Protect. He didn't know if Ava would understand the meaning of the gift, nor was he sure if she still remembered him. But this morning, when he woke up after a long night of insomnia, the first thought that came to his mind wasn't war, nor was it the court, but the faint smile of the little girl in Martha's arms yesterday afternoon. The door opened. Martha smiled kindly, like a grandmother in a distant memory. "Logan, come in." She's sitting in the back garden with Tom and Rachel. The back garden was a green grass area, scattered with rattan chairs, a hammock tied to 2 old chestnut trees. Ava sat in Rachel's lap, holding a small doll, her eyes still as wary as usual. Tom stood beside them, leaning on a wooden cane, his eyes thoughtful. Logan approached, not too fast. He sat down on the low wooden steps, a few meters from Ava. "I brought a gift," he said softly, then gently placed the stuffed animal on the grass. Ava didn't react immediately. Rachel gently stroked her hair, not urging her. Logan smiled, stood up, turned as if he had done what he needed to do. But as he placed his hand on the gate to leave, he heard a very small sound behind him, the sound of footsteps gliding lightly on the grass. A gentle force pulled on his pants leg. He bent down. Ava hugged his leg, her face pressed against his knee, her eyes drooping as if wanting to hide from everything. He squatted down, reached out and touched her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She didn't speak, but Ava looked up, her eyes searching for something. A small, warm hand placed on his hand, then slowly lifted to the teddy bear. Logan put it in her arms. For the first time, He saw Ava's lips moving not to cry. That noon, Martha invited Logan to stay for tea. Tom poured tea, his movements slow, calm. His hand had a long scar, so old that it had faded like burnt paper. "Where did you fight?" Tom asked, his voice hoarse, but without losing its sharpness. "Iraq. 2 years near Mosul." Tom nodded slightly. "I was in Vietnam, in 1968. No one said anything more for a moment." Logan put down his cup, feeling his throat hot, not because of the tea. "Have you ever met children in war zones?" Tom asked. Logan looked up at him, then nodded. "More than I want to remember." Tom lowered his eyes. The pain of a child is something that never disappears from the memory of the person who witnessed it. Martha sat at the table, opened the old radio placed near the window. A slow melody rang out a southern lullaby, an old but warm female voice, simple songs like a creaking bamboo hammock at the beginning of summer. Ava was already being carried into the house by Rachel. She sat on the sofa, her eyes looking into the distance. The song slowly reached the chorus, when Ava suddenly turned her head, touched Rachel's shoulder, then lisped the first 2 words. "Grandpa, hug." Rachel turned her head, surprised. "What did you say?" Ava repeated. "Grandpa, hug, bear." Rachel looked at Logan. He was standing near the door frame, his hand still on the hem of his shirt, as if about to retreat. She smiled lightly, nodded to him. "I think she trusts you more than anyone right now." Logan didn't know what to feel. He was used to seeing pain, but had never felt trust like the one hidden beneath it. A fragile, tiny belief, like the first drop of water after a dry season. That night, Logan couldn't sleep. He turned on the desk lamp, looked at the empty laptop screen. Outside the window was the darkness of the small town, only occasionally the light of a truck passing on the highway. He opened the old folder. Inside were incomplete notes, photos, records, unsent letters. Fallen comrades, a children's camp destroyed by mistaken attack, the cold hugs of nameless children. He sighed, then opened the word processor. The cursor blinked. He typed the title, "Applying to Volunteer Program to Support Children Recovering from War." The content of the letter wasn't flowery. He just told about Ava, a child abandoned in a car, about the feeling of carrying her running to the clinic, about the first whisper, and at the end of the letter he wrote, "I used to carry weapons. Now I want to learn how to carry faith." He clicked send, without hesitation. The next morning, Sarah sent a short message. "The trial of Carl and Linda will take place next week. Ava may be summoned, but only if necessary." Logan looked at the screen for a moment, then pressed reply. "I will be there. No matter what. No longer a passerby. No longer an accidental witness. He had chosen, and this time not because of duty, but because of something he thought he no longer had, a reason to start again. The courtroom of the Brookfield courthouse was packed that morning. No one expected that a case of forgetting a child in a car would make this quiet, small town the focus of local press and social media. From the steps outside the door, people were crowding, cameras pointed at the aisle, microphones hanging suspended like a swarm of buzzing bees. The courtroom door opened. Carl and Linda Monroe entered, hand in hand. Both were dressed neatly white shirts, trousers, shiny leather shoes. Linda wore light makeup, her hair tied high. Carl shaved his beard, his face serious. Everything was perfect, as if trying to play the role of model parents in a defense play. Opposite, Logan sat still. Rachel and Sarah sat in the same row, their eyes facing forward, not letting themselves get caught up in the noise around them. Richard Lehman, the lawyer representing the Monroes, stepped up first. His silver hair was slicked back, his voice deep and deliberate. Your Honor, my clients do not deny the incident that happened, but we request to be considered in a specific context: economic stress, work pressure, and unstable mental health. He flipped through the file. This is not an intentional act of violence, but the painful consequence of a society that pushes people to the limit. A few people in the audience nodded. Some reporters took notes continuously. Lehman continued. And about the key witness, Mr. Logan Hayes, a former US soldier who discovered baby Ava. We do not question his good intentions, but we are forced to ask, a man who doesn't know, passing by at the right time, breaking the car glass without reporting to the police, is there something unusual here? The entire courtroom froze. Logan wasn't surprised. He knew he would be dragged in like a pawn. He just looked straight at Lehman, unmoving. Delgado was the next to speak. He presented the results of the investigation in a decisive, emotionless manner. The supermarket camera recorded Linda Monroe leaving the SUV at 12:01, turning her head to look at the back seat, then slamming the door shut, not locking the air conditioning. 4 minutes later, this couple got into a silver Ford heading south. He opened the projector, projecting the video taken from the camera of a nearby resident. The image wasn't clear, but enough to see the action. Linda standing next to the car, glancing inside, then coldly pushing the door shut, not bothering to look back. We have also verified the time they were at the casino from 12:40 to 15:27. There are witnesses who heard them say they sent their child to someone to look after. However, there is no evidence that they actually gave Ava to anyone. Rachel stood up. She presented in an even voice, without stumbling. Your Honor, I am the doctor who directly gave emergency care to patient Ava Monroe. She was admitted to the hospital in a state of severe dehydration, with a body temperature exceeding safe limits. But that's not the worst part. She put up a series of medical photos. The child's body has at least 7 bruises at different stages, a scar on the left leg, a sign of an old fracture that was not treated properly. This isn't a one-time oversight. This is the cumulative effect of prolonged indifference. Lehman interrupted, trying to keep his voice calm. Doctor, are you sure these injuries didn't come from a recent incident? Young children often fall without remembering the reason. Rachel didn't blink. I've been in this industry for 12 years. I know the difference between an accidental fall and a systematic series of injuries. Sarah was then invited up. She presented the reasons why Ava couldn't testify. The girl is only 3 years old. Her psychological trauma is still unstable. According to the initial assessment, Ava has a recoiling reaction when she hears loud male voices. She cannot speak clearly enough to recount the incident, and giving her a confrontation would cause further psychological trauma. The court accepted. Logan breathed a sigh of relief, but not for long. Mr. Hayes, the judge, invited him to the stand. Logan stepped up, his gait slow. The entire courtroom was silent. Lawyer Lehman quickly continued his offensive. Mr. Hayes, you are a former soldier. You served in Iraq, correct? Correct. And you have been treated for post-war stress PTSD? Correct. Logan didn't avoid it. So, is it possible that you overreacted because of old trauma? Could your memory be affected, making the situation more serious than it actually was? Logan looked up. His eyes were clear, without a trace of anger, only certainty. Possible, he said. I used to panic when I heard artillery fire. I used to jump at the sound of children crying at night. But I will never forget Ava's face when I found her in that car. Her face flushed, her lips dry, her breath weak. There was no one around, not a single relative, only me and her. He paused for a beat, then continued the sentence that made the room as if the air had been sucked out. I didn't fight all those years in Mosul to come home and see children treated like trash." No one said anything. Even Lehman was silent. The courtroom lights shone on Logan's shoulders, making him seem taller than usual. After more than 2 hours of trial, the judge banged the gavel. "The court finds there are sufficient grounds to bring the matter to public trial. Ava Monroe will continue to be kept in special care under the supervision of the Department of Social Services until a final decision is made." Carl turned to Linda, his eyes annoyed. Linda just bowed her head, her hands twisted tightly. The press began to rush out into the hallway, lenses flashing continuously. Logan walked out of the courtroom. No one surrounded him. But as he turned into the small hallway behind, a small figure ran towards him, Ava, holding the teddy bear in the military uniform, her hair tousled, her eyes wide. He sat down, taking the unspoken hug. And in that moment, there was no more Doc, no more guilt, no more attacks. Only a soldier and the child he was determined not to let go. But things didn't end there. Early morning, the office of the Department of Social Services was almost empty. Sarah came in, a hot cup of coffee in her hand. The hallway lights weren't all turned on yet, but the electronic bulletin board was already flashing her name, File Code 1175-A, Urgent Biological Update. She sat down at her desk, turned on the machine. The latest email displayed in red. DNA analysis results Ava Monroe and 2 people claiming to be legal parents. Sarah took a deep breath, then clicked open. Just a few seconds of reading, but they were enough to make her forget to drink her coffee. No blood relation. Not with Carl. Not with Linda. She quickly typed a few lines of code to retrieve the birth records. Ava's birth certificate was submitted a year ago at a suburban hospital north of the city. But when she checked the medical facility code, the system returned a message. Does not exist. The doctor signing Thomas Elridge had no medical activity records in the past 10 years. Everything began to collapse in a chain. At the same time, Delgado was in the interrogation room, reviewing Linda's testimony from 2 weeks ago. She said she gave birth to Ava at home because she went into labor unexpectedly, had no birth certificate, so applied for it later. A story that sounded reasonable until today. Sarah came in, handed over the new file. Delgado didn't need to read it all, just the first 3 lines. "We can take this case to the federal level," he muttered. "If they actually bought the baby from an illegal adoption system, then it's not just abandonment or abuse. This is human trafficking." Sarah nodded. "I found a clue. There's someone who used to work as a manager at an orphanage in the southern suburbs. She said she saw Ava. Let's go." The woman's name was Maria Stanton, an elderly person with a slightly shaky voice, but an extremely clear memory. Sarah just showed a picture of Ava Maria, recognized her immediately. "Her name is June. That's what we called her. Her mother abandoned her in front of the center. About a year ago. She was only a few months old." "And then what?" Delgado asked. "A couple came, not going through the official process. They didn't register for adoption, just said they knew someone on the inside. I refused, but I wasn't on call that day. The person on duty that day took cash. A week later, her file was removed from the system. I protested, but was transferred somewhere else right after." "Do you know the faces of that couple?" Maria pondered. "I only remember the man had a very heavy southern accent. He called the woman Linda." Everything coincided with the time when Linda and Carl suddenly appeared with Ava in the town of Brookfield, introducing themselves as new parents after a long vacation in the South. Delgado looked at Sarah. She didn't need to say anything. Their eyes met enough to confirm they had crossed another threshold. The police station that very night. Carl was taken to the interrogation room for the second time. No more laughing. When Delgado threw the copy of the DNA results on the table, he just looked at it for a moment, then curled his lip. So what? She's not your child. So what? He repeated, his voice even. We raised her, fed her, clothed her. Who cares where she came from? Delgado didn't answer. He took out another photo, a video extracted from Maria's house, the hallway camera. The image of Carl secretly giving money to an orphanage worker. Linda was called in after. Before she even warmed the seat, she was shaking. When Delgado read out the charges, child abuse, document forgery, illegal adoption, Linda began to cry. Carl made me do it, she said, almost whispering. I didn't want to. I thought I would love her. But I couldn't. I tried. But every time she cried, I felt hate her. The last sentence slipped from her mouth like a spreading blood stain. No one replied. Even the tape recorder was silent, as if retreating before a confession that needed no justification. That afternoon, at Martha and Tom's small house, the sun streamed through the glass door, stretching across the wooden carpet. Ava was sitting in the middle of the floor, putting together colorful jigsaw pieces. Martha poured tea. Tom stood in the garden, watering vegetables. Rachel came to visit. She chatted with Martha in the kitchen, glancing at Ava through the open door. The little girl didn't know she was at the center of a storm of papers and crimes. She just pursed her lips, trying to fit two jigsaw pieces together. The door opened. Logan came in, his hands still dirty from the machinery. He had just helped at the repair shop nearby, a job that didn't require much communication, but enough to keep his hands busy. Hello, he said softly. Ava didn't look up. Rachel smiled, retreated into the kitchen. Logan placed the paper bag on the table. Inside was a picture book and a box of crayons. I brought this. For Ava. Ava looked up then. 1 beat, 2 beats. Then she stood up, walked towards him. When she got close, she slowed down, her hands trembling slightly, as if struggling. Dad. The small call but clear. Dad. Daddy ... Logan stood motionless. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Rachel heard. She stopped at the sink. Martha dropped the teacup. Tom turned his head at the door. Logan bent down, opened his arms. Ava threw herself into his arms, hugging him tight, not crying, not afraid. Just a hug, as if she had found her way home. Late at night, Sarah called Logan. I know about what happened today, she said on the phone. I didn't mean to interfere, but I have to ask. Yeah? If Ava has no blood relatives left, and the court allows it, have you ever thought about applying for custody of her? On the other end of the line, Logan didn't answer right away. Outside, the night wind began to whistle through the window. Finally, he said, very softly, yes. That night, Logan couldn't sleep. He sat on the small wooden chair in his rented room, the light from the desk lamp shining on his face, pale yellow, blurred. On the table was an old tin box, the only thing he brought back from Mosul, besides his faded military uniform. He opened the lid. Inside were small things, handwritten letters from comrades, a picture taken at the base, a black and white photo of an Iraqi girl being carried out of a pile of rubble. That girl was injured in the leg, blood staining the hem of her shirt. Logan carried her to the rescue helicopter, but the medical officer shook his head. No room. We only have 3 minutes left. He was forced to turn his back. That day, he didn't hear crying, just saw the eyes. Empty. Now, in Ava's eyes, he saw those pupils again. But this time, she was still alive. There was still a chance. He reached out and touched the photo, then slowly pulled out a new file. Application for child protection. Temporary, with the possibility of becoming long-term adoption. Name, Logan Hayes. Purpose: to protect, nurture, and accompany a minor Ava Monroe. Under the section Relationship, he didn't know what to write yet, but he thought of the whisper yesterday, short and clear. Daddy. The next morning, Logan went to the hospital. Rachel was sitting on the long chair behind the treatment area, a cup of coffee in her hand, the morning wind blowing lightly on the hem of her blouse. He sat down, not saying anything right away, just silent. A moment later, Rachel spoke. You don't need to say it. I know. You're scared. Logan looked straight at the garden. I don't know what it's like to be a father. I used to command people, used to live through artillery fire, bombs exploding. But when Ava called me Dad, I didn't know what I should do. Rachel nodded. That's a good start. He frowned. Being a father, she said, doesn't start from knowing everything. It starts from not leaving when your child needs you most. The wind blew across the courtyard, carrying the scent of lavender from the flower trellis in the corner of the courtyard. Logan bowed his head. I'm not sure I'm good enough. No one is sure. Rachel smiled softly. Even those of us who work in medicine sometimes stand in front of children and find ourselves helpless. But we still stay, because the kids need to know there's someone who won't turn their back. Logan was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, pulled out the file from his pocket that was almost finished, only missing a signature from a social worker. Rachel took it. Sarah will help you. Sarah wasn't surprised when Logan submitted the application. She only asked one question. Do you think this is because of guilt? Logan shook his head. I used to live with guilt. It didn't teach me to keep anyone around. But Ava is different. Sarah smiled, turned to the last page, where the witness signature was needed. So, starting today, you will learn how to not be alone anymore. A few days later, the court held the final hearing. Linda Monroe wasn't present. She was put into a rehabilitation program. Her parental rights were permanently revoked. Carl appeared in prison clothes, hands cuffed, his eyes still challenging. But no one cared about him anymore. All eyes were on Logan and Ava as they entered the courtroom. Logan wore a white shirt, holding Ava's hand. The girl wore a pink dress, her hair braided on both sides. In her hand was the teddy bear in the military uniform, the first gift he gave her. The entire courtroom was silent when the judge read the verdict. Based on the recommendation of the Department of Social Services, medical and psychological records, and the application for legal protection, the court approves the request of the applicant, Logan Hayes. Ava Monroe, from now on, will be named Ava Hayes. The adoption is approved under periodic supervision and officially takes effect from today. The sound of the gavel rang out, once, twice, decisively. Martha wiped away tears. Tom squeezed Rachel's hand. Sarah sighed in relief. Logan still didn't move. Not until Ava looked up at him, whispered, I have a home now. He bent down, hugged her close. On the steps of the courthouse, the late spring sun shone golden on Logan's shoulders. He carried Ava, walking slowly towards the small lawn in front of the yard. Behind him was the past war, darkness, fear. Ahead was an open door. Ava leaned her head on his shoulder, holding tightly to his lapel. She didn't ask where they were going, didn't ask what would happen. She was just silent, as if believing that, as long as he was there, this world was still worth living in. 6 months later, Brookfield turned to spring. The trees lining the road sprouted new buds, the leaves changing from moldy brown to a gentle pale green. In the park near the library, where there used to be only the sound of the wind and rustling dry leaves, now there was the sound of children's laughter. Ava was running around the base of a large oak tree, her hair tied askew, flying in the wind, her tiny feet churning forward, followed by a puppy with floppy ears trying to catch up, but never succeeding. Logan sat not far away, one hand holding a paper coffee cup, the other rubbing his forehead, smiling. He named the dog Button simply because Ava insisted on calling it a button. The house where they lived was on the edge of town, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a yard big enough to plant a few rows of tomatoes. Not spacious, not luxurious, but when the sun shone into the window, everything lit up like a place where people actually lived. Every morning, Logan got up early, turned on the kettle, made coffee, and tried to prepare breakfast without destroying the kitchen. Eggs were sometimes overcooked, sometimes raw. Ava sat dangling on the chair, grinning, occasionally spilling milk on the table. Once, he slipped and spilled the whole box of cereal on the floor. The two just stood looking and burst out laughing. They learned how to live like that, clumsy but honest. Logan had learned more things than he ever thought. How to braid hair on both sides without making it lopsided. How to rub Ava's back when she had nightmares. How to read a fairy tale in the right voice for the horse, the dragon, and the princess. And also, in those nights when Ava slept peacefully in his arms, he gradually learned how to sleep through the night without dreaming of bombs or blood. One night, Logan opened his laptop, wrote an email to a former comrade. "I'm not going anywhere anymore. I found a reason to stay." Rachel was still Ava's regular health monitor. She came once a month, bringing a stethoscope, new toys, and homemade cookies. Those visits no longer resembled medical checkups, but like afternoon tea among family members. Once, Ava sat on a chair, pulled up her shirt to her stomach, raised her hand and said, "Dr. Rachel, listen to my tummy." Rachel laughed, gently placed the stethoscope, then glanced at Logan, washing dishes in the kitchen. She's starting to learn how to control people. One Saturday afternoon, she invited the two to attend the community health exhibition organized by the center. Logan didn't want to appear in front of the crowd, but Rachel persuaded not to take credit, but to let someone see hope. Logan stood on a small stage, next to a poster of Ava's first day in the hospital, face covered, recounting the story in a slow voice. Some people in the audience shed tears. Some asked to shake his hand after leaving the stage, but Ava just stood below, waving her hands and calling out, "Daddy! Daddy! Come down quickly!" That evening, they had dinner at Rachel's house. 3 people sat around the small wooden table in the warm kitchen. Ava fell asleep in the middle of the meal, her head leaning on Logan's shoulder, her hand still holding half a peanut butter sandwich. Rachel took a blanket and covered her, then sat back at the table, quietly. Logan looked up at her, his voice deep but clear. "If I want Ava to grow up with a strong female role model beside her, then are you willing to stay?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She just looked at him for a long time, then gently reached under the table, found his hand, and squeezed it tight. Ava now goes to kindergarten. Every morning, Logan brings her to the class gate. The girl kisses him on the cheek, then runs in with a backpack bigger than herself. She loves to draw. Recently, she often drew a house with a huge sun behind it and a big-handed man hugging a tiny baby. The teacher asked, "Who is that?" Ava replied without hesitation, "That's Daddy Logan." One afternoon, the teacher invited parents to attend the lesson. During the introduction, the teacher asked each child, "What is your dream for the future?" Ava stood up, slightly embarrassed, then said clearly, "I want to be a doctor, like Dr. Rachel, and be a mum, like Daddy Logan." No one laughed. There was only a gentle silence, as if everyone understood. That girl had experienced more than words could tell. That afternoon, in the living room, Ava sat reading a book. Button lay at her feet, his head resting on the blanket. The spring sun streamed through the window, covering 2 small shadows, One person, one dog, as peaceful as a painting hung in the room of someone who is happy. A few days later, Logan drove Ava back to the old parking lot where everything had started. The old SUV was gone. The parking lot had a new layer of plastic. But the corner of the steps where Logan used to sit, his hands bloody, his eyes staring at the emergency room, was still there. He sat down. Ava climbed onto his lap, leaning her head against his chest. No one said anything for a while. Finally, he asked, "Do you know why this place is important?" Ava looked up, tilting her head. "Because Dad met me here." Logan nodded, then shook his head slightly. "No, because Dad found himself again here." Ava didn't say anything. She just squeezed her hands and hugged him tightly. Spring doesn't just come according to the calendar. It comes when someone is brave enough to forgive the past, strong enough to move on, and gentle enough to love again. For Ava, spring is the first time she has been truly loved. For Logan, spring is the first time he has learned how to live instead of just existing. And for all those who have wandered in the dark, spring can always return if we still have a little light in our hearts. The story of Logan and Ava is not just about a soldier rescuing a child from a locked car in the midday sun. It's the journey of a human being who seemed to have lost connection with the world, but found himself again through the eyes of a child who had been forgotten. A child who doesn't cry loudly, doesn't speak, but still hopes someone is perceptive enough to hear the silent cry for help. This story is recreated from many real records, real cases, with the names of characters and locations changed to protect the identities of the victims. If you feel this ending makes your heart sink, please share it with a friend, a support group, or simply forward it via WhatsApp. Because who knows, somewhere out there is another child, also waiting for someone to listen. Have you ever passed by such a moment? I am here, and I am reading everything you share.